Welcome back to Magic Untapped here on YouTube. I am Barry White. The year is 2009, and for years, Wizards of the Coast has been trying to successfully turn Magic the Gathering into a good video game. And that started with the 1997 Microprose developed video game Magic the Gathering Duels of the Planeswalkers for PC. And it's in 2009 that they tried again with the conveniently also named Magic the Gathering Duels of the Planeswalkers.
Developed by Stainless Games and published by Wizards of the Coast, Magic the Gathering Duels of the Planeswalkers, not to be confused with the 1997 PC game, came out as a timed exclusive on Xbox 360 in June of 2009, followed by releases for Windows PC and PlayStation 3 in June and November of 2010 respectively. The game, at its core, follows the standard at the time rules for the paper Magic the Gathering collectible card game, with players playing lands, summoning creatures, and casting spells as they try to defeat their opponent. Unlike the paper game, however, players cannot make their own decks in the video game. Stainless Games characterized the game as an arcade version of the much more complicated paper game, and, as such, simplified a chunk of the gameplay to make the video game much more approachable to new players. For example, as mentioned, there is no deck construction. Instead, players simply have access to a limited number of pre-constructed decks to take into battle. As they play against and defeat opponents, however, new decks and cards are unlocked to make these pre-constructed decks more powerful. Another example of gameplay simplification within the video game is, rather than players manually tapping lands, the game software auto-taps them for them based upon the cards that are remaining in one's hand. Also, whenever an action occurs that other players could respond to, a brief timer appears to allow for player actions, though players can pause the timer should they need more time to contemplate their possible responses. Furthermore, players are given a free mulligan at the beginning of each match, with any future mulligans resulting in that player redrawing their hand, plus one card for each instance. Another way Stainless Games helps newer players in this game is by providing the option to bias shuffle the opponent's deck. This results in the AI opponent's more powerful cards to be stacked at or near the bottom of the deck, and, thus, will be unlikely to be drawn and used. As the player progresses through the game though, this shuffling bias becomes less and less enforced, thus allowing players to become more likely to face certain powerful cards as they progress further and further through the game. As for the game's AI, it doesn't actually employ any strategy in terms of card combinations and synergies. Rather, it uses a decision tree based upon the computer's situation at the time. To simplify task evaluation, it employs a look-ahead algorithm that strives to be correct 99% of the time. That stated, it only looks ahead roughly 6 total actions at a time. As a result, players found the AI's behavior to be noticeably different than that of a human opponent, such as not holding back blockers when attacking, as the AI tends to be more aggressive than the typical human opponent. Likewise, the AI does not take into consideration what its human opponent might do in response or on a future turn. It simply takes the best actions for victory based upon what's going on in the game at that exact moment. As for the game itself, it features a handful of play modes. Campaign mode, where the player duels against several AI-controlled opponents for new decks and new cards. Challenge mode, where the player must find the correct combination of plays on a single turn in order to defeat their opponent, akin to the Magic the Puzzling challenges that were found back in the day in the Duelist magazines. Single player mode versus an AI-controlled opponent, and cooperative play against the computer. Players can also play in both casual and ranked competitive games over Xbox Live. In the Windows PC version, players can assist one another, but the second player has to use a gamepad while player 1 uses the keyboard and mouse. In October of 2009, the game's first expansion, Duel the Dragon, came out. It added 3 new decks, 3 new cards for each of the 8 original decks, 6 more campaign ladder matches, a new boss character, Nicol Bolas, and 3 new challenges. The game's second expansion, which came out May 2010, adds 3 new cards to each of the game's existing decks, as well as a few entirely new decks, including Nicol Bolas's Eons of Evil deck from the previous expansion. New challenges, achievements, and so on are also added. Sales of Magic the Gathering Duels of the Planeswalkers wasn't too shabby, as, in its first 5 weeks on the Xbox Live Marketplace, the game was downloaded more than 440,000 times, with 170,000 full game purchases at $10 a pop. It was also the Xbox 360's top-ranked title for the first 2 weeks after release. In terms of reviews, it received fairly favorable scores overall, with outlets such as IGN giving the game a 7.8 out of 10, and Destructoid scoring the game at 7.5 out of 10.
The 2009 edition of Magic the Gathering Duels of the Planeswalkers did well enough that Wizards of the Coast greenlit a sequel, also creatively named Magic the Gathering Duels of the Planeswalkers 2012 for Windows PC, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 3. But that's a story for a different video. If you enjoyed this video, please click on those like and subscribe buttons. Also, Magic Untapped has a tip jar on Patreon if you are feeling so generous. We appreciate the support. Thank you for watching.